Welcome everyone to Richmond Yacht Club Sail Advisory Speaker Series for November. Tonight we have Jan Pehrson talking about sailboat racing Bahamian style. She has some amazing photos and spent a lot of time there in that culture. Really excited to see her photos and hear about her experience. Without too much more ado, let me introduce Jan. Just before you, everyone who's online can't hear you unless you have a microphone. So if you have questions, I'll bring the mic, but Jan would like to go through a presentation first and then we'll do questions after. Thanks.
So like Randall said, I'm Jan Pehrson, and you can all hear me? Good. And I'm a proud member of this great club, the Richmond Yacht Club. And I'm going to take you for a ride tonight. I'm going to take you for a ride on a Bahamian sloop. And how I'm going to do that is through my photos, because I've been photographing them for about the last half dozen years. So these boats are wild. These boats are crazy. They're overpowered. They have lots of people. They have lots of sail area and they're lots of fun. So join me. But first I want to say that I'm a sailor. I'm a sailing photojournalist. And I dedicate this presentation to the Bahamian sloop sailing community. My passion is sailing and so is theirs. I'm honored to be included in their community and appreciate their sharing their stories with me. All my efforts to record the evolution of their sport and the dedication of the participants of the sport I've done as a gift to them. So I've been a member of this club for more than 40 years, and I live across the street at the Brickyard Landing condos. I want to give you a brief introduction to myself and my life before being in the Bahamas, so you can understand how I came to make this connection 7 years ago with the Bahamian sailing community. But before introducing myself, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, I want to show you a few of my recent photos from the Bahamas to give you a preview of this sport, which is unique in the world. Bahamian wooden sloop sailing, just like the Bahamas itself, is underreported. Not many people know about it. Not many photos have been taken. Not many articles have been written. So I decided to change that. So here's a preview of what a sail, Bahamian style, in a regatta looks like. This is Ed Sky, a 28-foot long Class A Bahamian wooden racing sloop. Mast height is 60 feet or taller. The boom is 35 feet or more, overhanging the transom of this 28-foot boat. The huge sail area is ballasted by sandbags, movable lead ingots, maybe or maybe not internal lead, and crew hiking out on boards called pry boards. And if you could hold your questions, I'll probably get there. Oh, Randall's on it. Thank you. So this is what I'm going to do tonight, is take you for a ride on the pry boards through these photos, so you know what it's like to sail one of these crazy boats. Here's a start. Boats start from anchor, sails down. Here's a little problem. This is rounding up here is Susan Chase, which is a 21-foot long Class B boat. These boats are a handful. Wooden boats are heavy, cotton sails are heavy, and as you can see, the crew are usually heavy, and for good reason. As you can see, Bahamian sailing is night and day from our own international sailing. When I first started writing and photographing this Bahamian sport 7 years ago, I could barely understand what was going on, despite all my experience in sailboat racing, photography, and journalism. Over time, thanks to the many Bahamian sailors who have shared their stories with me, I've come to know more about Bahamian sailing than most people outside of the Bahamas. In this presentation, I'm going to do my best to show you, through my photos, their sport of wooden sloop racing, which grew out of workboats used for fishing, morphed into racing and an extreme sport, and is totally unique in the world. So back to my introduction, and keep that photo of Susan Chase in your mind. I hope you're never quite in that same situation yourselves here on the bay. So to show you the path that led me to the Bahamas, my passion is sailing. My motto is, land was created so that boats would have a place to visit. More than 40 years ago, I joined Richmond Yacht Club as I was racing my Cal 20, and I needed a club to represent. So I picked the club where all the best sailors were. At that time, my sponsors, Bob Klein and Jimmy DeWitt, told me I was the second woman ever to join the club. And I don't know if that's true, but there weren't many, and there were about 300 members at that time. Since that time, we voted to allow spousal members to become regular members. Everything is much more fun around here now. We're sailing better than ever, and our membership has more than doubled. For years, I raced boats, my boats, other boats, on the San Francisco Bay. I was a juniors instructor 2 times for about 10 years total, and was brought into the juniors program by our very own Mr. Fun. I earned my 100-ton Coast Guard license and dabbled in sailing photography. Then in the year 2000, I decided to generate interest in our sport of sailboat racing by taking the most exciting sailboat racing action images possible. So I started to travel and to photograph Grand Prix sailing. I went to the America's Cup in Auckland in 2000 and also 2003 to photograph and write. In Auckland in 2000, I found former Richmond Yacht Club junior sailor Paul Art, by then an international sailing superstar. He was leading the St. Francis Yacht Club's America One Challenge. My photo of him sailing America One became my business card that I'm showing you here. Back at the Richmond Yacht Club, the juniors all signed a banner wishing Paul good luck, and I presented it to him in Auckland. After my start at the 2000 America's Cup, I became a sailing photojournalist. So first I was a sailor, and now I was a sailor with a good camera. Photojournalism was natural as I had so much sailing experience from the San Francisco Bay and the Pacific Ocean that I understood where to point and when to click. I traveled extensively, both photographing and writing about sailing, and sometimes just sailing, and sometimes, of course, returning to my other career of creating computer systems for businesses. So for 7 years, I was the sailing columnist for the Marin IJ newspaper in Marin County, publishing more than 100 articles for them. My objective was to drive the stick and ball sports like baseball and football clear off the front page and to dominate the sports section, especially with sailing. I wanted them to think that everybody was sailing, not watching TV, watching those stick and ball sports. In addition to writing my column, I photographed many dozens of Grand Prix regattas in the United States, New Zealand, and Europe, publishing in international sailing magazines. So here are a few of my photos from that time. This is from the 2006 big boat on our own San Francisco Bay at the St. Francis. Here's more big boat. This may look like a familiar situation to many of you. I'm sure many of you have been there and done that. And here's 2006, the Star Worlds on the San Francisco Bay at the St. Francis. And this photo made the cover of Seahorse. I believe because he's got this sheet in his teeth. So in 2007, I photographed the America's Cup in Valencia, Spain, as a Lingy of Switzerland won over Team New Zealand. And that was pretty thrilling from a helicopter to see that final race. And here's more action from a Lingy racing Team New Zealand in 2007. Here's the awards ceremony with Lingy winning. And back on the bay in 2013, I photographed yet another America's Cup. This was the 6th time that I had the opportunity to photograph the America's Cups. And Larry, in this photo, Larry Ellison of Oracle is watching from his yacht as Team New Zealand foils past. Team New Zealand was the first to figure out how to foil their boat to weather, and they took an early lead in the series. But Oracle came back to win the America's Cup 9-8, as many of you remember. It was pretty thrilling racing. Here's Team New Zealand showing how to do it, and Larry caught on. And here's Cows Week. I had the opportunity to photograph many other regattas in Europe. Many are just so beautiful. And in 2019, back at our own Richmond Yacht Club, our Commodore Ornith Keene asked me to photograph the Junior Women Sailing Championship, and I did. They all signed it, and a copy was given to Kersey Clausen in appreciation. Also, as I had for a long time, I continued to sail across oceans to Greece and Hawaii, up and down the Pacific coast to the Caribbean, to Greenland, the Mediterranean. And here I am sailing in Greenland in 2014. This is us in Greenland. This is the boat Imagine going through pack ice, leaving the harbor. A lot of the fishermen were telling us not to go out, but we did, and it was okay. But that's all another story. I sailed to Greenland with former Richmond Yacht Club member Norton Smith on his steelboat Imagine, shown here. And we're leaving for the open sea. And maybe Norton and I can tell you about sailing to Greenland on another speaker's night. I approached him about it, and he said it might sound interesting. So we had quite an adventure. So then in 2014, everything changed for me. I saw photos of Bahamian sloop sailing, and I wanted to go there. So Richmond Yacht Club members Steve and June Jones, right here in front of you, wearing family regatta t-shirts in memory of this regatta, were there at that time in the Bahamas. And they invited me to join them on their sailboat Windrose. So I jumped at the chance. I'd seen some art, and I'd seen a couple of photos of Bahamians hanging on for dear life off the side of wooden boats with huge sails. In Bahamas, the word sloop means something different than we mean. To a Bahamian, a sloop means a type of traditional wooden workboat, which they build themselves out of their own native hardwoods that grow on their islands. These sloops were once used for transportation and fishing, and now they've morphed into a speedster and raced for thrills and for prize money. Little been written about these regattas in recent times. I know because before I went to join Steve and June, I read everything that I could, and there just wasn't much. Few action photos existed. So I went to the Bahamas in 2014 to try to document this unique in the world sport, to photograph the beauty, but particularly the action. Sloop sailing is now the national sport of the Bahamas, replacing cricket, which was a holdover from the colonial times. So here's what I found in the Bahamas when I joined Steve and June in 2014. Just gorgeous water. This is Cocoa Plum Beach Sandbar. It's indescribably beautiful, and it's a mecca for kite surfers. Bahamas is an island nation, and people don't know where it is. It has 700 islands. 30 or more are inhabited by a total of only 400,000 people. Most Americans don't understand that the Bahamas are in the Atlantic, not in the Caribbean. The Bahamas stretch southwest off the Florida coast, and in the map you see the Florida coast in the top left. And they stretch for 750 miles to the southeast, where they are within 50 miles of Hispaniola, by which I mean Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So you can see Haiti there at the bottom right. So Cuba lies to the west, and on the other side of Cuba is the Caribbean. So the Bahamas are jut out into the Atlantic off of Florida. 80% of the tourists to the Bahamas go to one single destination, the Atlantis Casino in Nassau, the capital. And on the map, I've circled where Hurricane Dorian hit a couple of years ago. And Nassau is under that, so it's about in the top third of the chart, and it's the capital. So tourists that go here and stop here sure miss a lot. They miss beautiful, warm, clear, azure water. They miss ideal sailing, ideal sailboat racing, and it's a shame. So many people thought that when Hurricane Dorian happened, the entire Bahamas was wiped out. Although, as you can see, that's only a very small area in the north. Not to minimize the damage, but it was to one particular area. And as I said, the Bahamas are just plain underreported, especially the sloop sailing. People confuse them with Bermuda, but especially with the Caribbean islands, which are volcanic. Bahamas have very shallow water and they're limestone. So if you take your boat to the Bahamas, go here. These are the Exumas, and they're in the out islands. They're far away from Florida, number 100 miles away from Florida. So the international community, sloop sailing, I don't mean sloop sailing, I mean cruising community, gathers here from wherever, France and Cape Town, South Africa, and Canada, and United States, and you name it. And so this is a destination. So if you sail to the Bahamas, don't stay too long in the north. Continue sailing southeast, even though you're going to weather through the trade winds to get there, to the out islands, to the Bahamas. So getting to the sloop racing itself. In 2014, when I visited Steve in June, I photographed and documented my first Bahamian Sloop Regatta, the Family Island Regatta. So what's a regatta look like? What's it feel like to be here? What's it feel like to be on the boats? In my articles, I've described it as a Kentucky Derby, Homecoming, and Super Bowl all rolled into one. Kentucky Derby because of the prize money and side betting. Homecoming because of the glittering women, and Super Bowl because of the intense inter-island competition. Families are racing families. Cousins from one island are racing against cousins from another island on wooden boats they build themselves. The racing takes place at about 25 different locations throughout this island nation, and is partially financed by the government to the tune of about $2 million a year through the Regatta Desk of the Bahamas. The Regatta Desk is a subsidiary of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fish, and that's its responsibility. Fish and ag, they call it, ag and fish. Its responsibility is to give out money for these races and support these races. Of the 25 regattas, the Family Island Regatta is the national championship and the largest. At the Family Island Regatta, there may be as many as 60 boats on the starting line, representing dozens of islands. Boats and crews move to regattas from their home islands, transported by freighters, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles. If they're closer, they may come in under tow or under their own sail power, but in many cases, the inner island freighters carry them as deck cargo. For example, boats and crews from the Ragged Islands in the south travel to regattas in the north. Boats and crews from the Abacos in the north travel to regattas in the south. It's regatta time. Spectators place side bets and party by land and on the water, cheering on the sloops from their home islands, entertained by reggae, Bahamian music called Rake and Scrape, beauty contests, marching bands, and on and on. It's a party. It's fun on the water and off. The most spectacular of my regatta photographs are riding the Pry, which is where I want to take you all tonight. These are crews sitting on the pry boards, shoved out on the side of the boat, serving as movable ballast, perched one behind the other, high over the water, feet dangling in the air, with nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing to hold on to, but the plank they sit on, smiles on their faces doing their job. Some of the competitors are really not so competitive. Let's say the sloop regattas are in the fun spirit of our beer can racing on steroids. Crew are transported to the regattas from their home islands, housed, fed, and paid a per diem by the government. So what's not to like? Being a crew in these regattas is where it's at. At any time, all boats can win, well-financed or underfunded. Most boats are built under trees in the yards of the designer builders. It is possible to find the materials by going into the swamps and finding trees and roots of the shape you want, and to build a sloop yourself using a few simple tools. This is the Sloop Crazy Partner, and it was built by one of her crew. I was honored when the photo I took in 2014 of Tidal Wave, the winning Class A sloop at the Family Island Regatta when I was visiting Steve and June, was chosen for the 2015 t-shirts and programs. Inspired by the recognition, I wanted to return. Winning skippers can take home major prize money totaling tens of thousands of dollars from these regattas. But this Bahamian sport is a passion, not a for-profit activity. Wooden boats are expensive to build, if you don't build it yourself, that is, and to maintain. And competitive boats carry extra spars and have as many as 6 mainsails to choose from, depending on the strength of the wind that day. The largest is often called the Ghost. So since my introduction to photographing the Family Island Regatta, when I visited Steve and June Jones there on Windrows, documenting this amazing sport of Bahamian wood sailing racing, wooden sloop racing, has become my calling. Out of nowhere, I was presented with an opportunity to return. On board Windrows with us in 2014 was Ken Kramer, who was refitting a boat of his own in Florida named Slowpoke. The name is Slowpoke. It's pronounced Slowpoke. I'll sail you back to the Bahamas, he said. Again, I jumped at the chance. Within a year, Ken Kramer and I launched Slowpoke, sailed her to the Bahamas, and started sailing her from island to island in the winters, visiting skippers of the Bahamian sloops, boat builders, and owners of these sloops. So that's Ken Kramer and myself in the photo with Slowpoke behind us. So it's been 7 years now, me photographing, interviewing the sailors, and publishing articles about their sport, mainly in Southwind's magazine out of Florida, and also online web sailing sites where Americans have had a chance to see these boats that hadn't seen them before. Ken giving the builders tools to use to build their boats from native hardwoods and arranging donations of boat parts for the sloops. One thing about sailing on a slow boat, like slow boat, which is a little bit of a joke because she's really not that slow. She has a powerful diesel engine, which helps the fact that she's underpowered, is that being slow, we get to know the culture. So we spent some time passing through every area. And as Slowpoke is a Morgan Out Island 36, built for coastal and out island cruising, she is very shallow draft, like the Bahamian Sloops. So we poked along in between sandbars, drawing 4 feet and passing through shallow bays and sloughs. We didn't have to stay in the deep water channels and open ocean like many of the international cruising boats. So Slowpoke is off the grid with water maker, solar, wind generators, and Ken is now a resident of the Bahamas, and Slowpoke has her own permanent mooring ball there. So Ken and Slowpoke have become Bahamian. At first, the regattas were so strange to me that I had trouble figuring out what was going on. I just simply couldn't understand what was happening around me. Patrick Hanna, photographer for the Nassau Tribune newspaper, took me under his wing, literally leading me by the hand and guiding me around, introducing me. We were on the race committee boats. We were ferrying large crews from the shore to the boats, expletives flying, spars, by which I mean pry boards and extra booms and maybe even extra masks, hanging everywhere off the boats, with bags of sand, crews jumping from boat to boat. It was bedlam. Used to sailing and crewing, I tried to help fend off. Sit down, said Patrick. Just protect your little index finger and get ready to press the shutter and stay out of the way. So at first I was just so out of my element, I couldn't even understand what the Bahamians were saying. When they don't want guests to the islands to understand them, they speak a different dialect called Geechee Gullah, which I can now understand that I sure couldn't in the beginning. Once again, Patrick helped me. He explained the boats start from anchor with sails down, then boom goes the gun, then there's chaos. Only the Bahamians could turn fishing from a workboat into an extreme sport. As Ken and I got to know them, we were literally adopted by the sloop sailing community. I donated my time and photos. In exchange, the Bahamian sloop sailors helped me in any way they could. When there were small regattas on remote islands that Slowpoke couldn't get to, the sailors brought me along in their speedboats. My photographs of their boats began appearing everywhere. To do their boats justice, I upgraded my camera. I now have the top-of-the-line pro camera, a Canon full-frame mirrorless R6, and 100-500 millimeter lens, and a drone. So, Bahamian Racing has its own special rules. The rule book is only 10 pages long, and that's it. Rules change frequently, and there are different rules for different regattas. So what are these racing rules? Well, sloops must be Bahamian designed, built, owned, and skippered. There's no crew limit. So sometimes on a Class A sloop, which is 28 feet long, there might be 15 people, most of them out on the pry board. Crews must be mostly Bahamian, but sometimes a few lucky guests get to go along for a ride. Hulls and spars must be constructed of wood. Sails must be cotton or a cotton-like fabric. And of course, these materials are heavy. No winches, period, no winches. No wind or speed instruments or computers. No fancy electronics, period. Just good old-fashioned go fast, seat of the pants sailing and navigation, honed by sailors and their families since the times when Bahamian sloops or used for transportation and fishing. So there's one restriction that has to do with measuring, and that's the length of the boats. Class A, 28 feet max. Class B, 21 feet. Class C, 17 feet. And the youth boats, 12 feet. But mast heights and boom lengths are not limited. We recommend for new construction, say the rules, on Class A, a mast height of 60 feet and a boom length of 32 feet. Note, this is a recommendation only. So as crews push for more and more speed, mast heights tend to grow taller over time. Mast heights and boom lengths are suggested in the rules, but not limited. 60 feet is suggested as a max mast height in the rules, but some masts are higher. But mast heights are self-restricting. To quote longtime fifth-generation boat builder Mac Knowles, I know his name looks like Mark Knowles, but he is Mac Knowles, from Mangrove Bush, a tiny settlement on a tiny island. If you build the mast too high, it takes itself down. These are full keel displacement hulls, but they sail faster than their theoretical hull speed due to the huge sail areas. I've actually seen one sail itself down under the water. It got to going so fast. The bowmen on these boats are important because the skippers can't see through the sails. So you can see the bowmen looking out there, telling the skippers what to do. Traditional Bahamian boats were built upon a single keel member. And this method of construction is intended to encourage boats whose construction can be done on the beach by simple means, by amateurs, without undue sophistication or expense. So that's the intention of sloop racing. And you'll see on this sketch, it says none of this. They don't want anything even approaching a fin keel, period. In other words, the rules say no ugly hull shapes. In other words, nothing modern. This must be in the spirit of traditional Bahamian workboat, period. No fin keels, please, or you will be disqualified, and they do that. So, courtesy of Basil Mims, the photographer who worked for the Nassau Tribune newspaper at that time, here's a photo of the first 1954 Family Island Regatta. And as you can see, they're starting. They're raising their sails from anchor. The original boats had live wells for fish and used to race to Nassau from the Bahamian Out Islands hundreds of miles away. Sniffing for wind, the old sailors sensed the fastest course to market, guiding boats shaped just right for the local conditions on their island. The first boats to arrive got the best prices for their fish. Regattas developed, and originally they raced for livestock. So if you sailed first across the finish line, you might get a pig. Sloop racing is about tradition as well as today thrills. Winning sloop sailors are local heroes. The early sailors had streets named for them and songs written about them and their exploits. Today's sloops, custom built for racing, are direct descendants of the original working sloops that were used for transportation and fishing. Likewise, many of today's sailors are direct descendants from the original sailing families. And this reminds me of the Richmond Yacht Club. We are family oriented. We have many multi-generational families here. So do they. I know that there are many things about their racing that's a lot different than what we do, but we have that in common with them. It's multi-generational. Some of the early sloops have been rebuilt over and over and are still racing with hardly a stick of wood in them from the original boat. Other boats have newer versions built all the time, like Susan Chase 5. There was a Susan Chase 1. They retired her, built Susan Chase 2. They retired her. Susan Chase 3. You get the picture. More and more Susan Chases all the time. But some boats never retire. The wood in them just gets replaced by new wood. Racing sloops built today still have hull shapes optimized for local conditions on their islands. For example, boats from Black Point, Exuma are built sharp flat. What's sharp flat? Sharp on the sides, flat on the bottom, as opposed to sloops from Long Island, which have a wine glass shape. This is a photo of the sloop New Legend being built under a tree. You can't see the tree. This photo of Class A sloop New Legend's ribs is courtesy of the family of Mac Knowles. Sloops are made of native hardwoods that they have still growing on the islands. Either wild tamarin or horse flesh is often used. Horse flesh, they tell me, is harder. These are design build projects. Sloop boat builders are artists at work. They don't use any drawings. They do it out of their head. They get the stem and the ribs from the root of a tree, or perhaps the branch of a tree. The trunk of a tree. The branches, they say, aren't generally strong enough. They walk through the forest and eyeball the trees to find the right shapes, as each of the ribs are different. They may get 1 or 2 ribs from a root, so they need about a dozen different roots to build a 28-foot Class A boat. Then they slice the roots up like potato chips to get the ribs. So here's a boat being modified. This is Hugh Ray Lloyd, called Cheyenne. And he's the builder and owner and skipper of this Class C sloop, Warrior. Ken and I wanted to visit Cheyenne. We'd met him. And so we sailed slowpoke and anchored her in 4.5 feet of water right off of his settlement. And his house was shown on the Navionics chart on his tiny little settlement, tiny little bay. And so we launched the dinghy and went in, walked up to his house, and he was very welcoming and wanted to show us what he was doing. So Cheyenne told us his story, as did many of these sailors. He went to see a regatta as a boy, and he realized that he wanted to compete. He envisioned himself capable of building a fast racing boat of his own. He collected the necessary materials out of pocket, had his wife make sails, showed up at the next regatta with his first boat, and was successful. So now he's a builder of fast boats for his settlement. He paints them all yellow. So here he is, marking the stem of Warrior, the bow of Warrior. He wants to make her go faster, so he's modifying her. It's time for Warrior to get a modification. Cheyenne is trying to get rid of unnecessary drag caused by friction, so he's shallowing up the bow of his sloop. We would say he wants wetted surface. He just says he's shallowing, getting rid of dead wood. So first he draws in the sand. Then he takes a Sharpie and marks the hull with a magic marker, looks at all his marks and thinks about it for a while, figuring out how shallow to make the cut to make her go fastest. No CAD computer models for Cheyenne. Then he looks for a buttonwood tree near his house to replace some of the ribs, which will have to be replaced in the bow. Ken gave him an axe and he liked it. He said, "I'll go to the swamp and look for a buttonwood the right shape and I'll cut it down. If my chainsaw give up, I'll use your axe." So his shallowing was successful. Here he is, flying. So let's go to that race I promised you. Let's see the start. Okay, before the start, what sails to select and what spars? Better check the ballast. How about the lead ingots? Do we have the right number of lead ingots? And how about the sandbags? One time I was on a tender for one of the boats and the skipper wanted more weight. So he handed us an empty sandbag. We went into the beach, we filled it up with sand, we passed it back onto the sloop, and it was used for the race. They used to throw sandbags off the boat sometimes during the race to lighten up for a downwind leg or whatever, but they don't do that anymore. The rules have changed. Starts must be at anchor with sails down. Skippers draw for their starting position, and only the sloop on the right side of the line can sail off on port tack. Why? Safety. They can't maneuver before the start. These are heavy wooden boats with long overhanging booms. Regattas are inter-island rivalries. And I've said that there are 25 different regattas sailed around the islands during the year, and dozens of islands and settlements represented by these boats being ferried all over the place to race against each other. The no team racing rule went into effect to prevent crews from one island ganging up against crews from another island. We have now the no team racing rule, and that's after one sloop from one island just simply stopped racing in the middle of the race. They just stopped. They dropped their sails, they sat there, they stopped. And there was nothing saying they couldn't in the rule at that time. So their points got thrown to, it worked out to the advantage of their rival that they just stopped and lost their points like that. So now we have the no team racing rule. But this rule is very hard to enforce because the crews say, why not help your friends? So they do it anyway, although it's not always so obvious as simply dropping their sails and stopping to sail. The races are mainly about the spectators. There are side bets, sometimes announcers, big screens, radio. It's about my island sailing against your island. It's about passion. If the start line is perfectly even, that's not so as important as the spectator's view of the racing. Setting up the start line is a tough job, a very tough job. It helps to be big, strong, and thick-skinned. We've never seen disputes come to blows, but elevated verbiage is common. It takes a long time to line up properly to the wind, and changing the line is very difficult. This is a Class A start. These are 28-foot boats. You'll notice the long overhanging booms. Here's a Class C start. The boats all like to try to sneak up on the line. So the race committee is constantly trying to keep them behind the line. And there may be as many as 60 boats on the line in this class, the most popular class, Class C. They don't use any fancy flags. The race committee goes around with a megaphone before the start and tells everyone the course. And a cannon or a shotgun gets the race started. Recalls are not possible. One time I was with the race committee and our motorboat ran over the anchor road of one of the sloops on the starting line, cutting it in half, ruining the sloop's start, and losing the anchor. I assumed the race would be restarted, but the committee didn't do it. It wasn't possible. So here's a shotgun being used for the start. And here's another start. This is from my drone. You can really see the boom overhangs here, and it's a pretty even starting line they've managed to set there. After the start, it's just kind of chaos. Whole crew is pulling the anchor, raising the mainsail. The Bahamian out islands are called the family islands, and the families are large, sometimes a dozen people, maybe. And sloop racing is about families racing families. So here, this is the Long Island boys pulling the anchor of their Class A sloop, New Legend. Here's their competition. This is Lundy Robinson and his family and his friends from Black Point next to them, pulling their anchor. We're right in front of them, ready to get out of the way. So let's talk about going into the wind or checking. Checking, what's checking? Well, it's their word for beating or going to weather. They have their own words for things. The Bahamian Racing Rules say what's okay when you're tacking or rounding the markers, they call them markers, overlaps, overtaking, and so on. And these are their very own rules, and they differ from the international rules. They're basically made about safety, avoiding collisions on these wooden, heavy, overpowered boats. Practically speaking, the race committee follows the boats around the course with a megaphone when they race, urging them to stay clear of each other. And today, sloops must finish with the same crew they started with. Before this change in the rules, crews used to jump overboard at the weather mark to lighten up the sloops for the downwind leg, but they passed a rule and this is not permitted anymore. You can't do that. So here's the Pride crew. A lot of people riding the Pride go barefoot because they know they're going to get their shoes wet, and so why wear them? They're not your average rail meet, and they're critical to the speed of the boats, obviously. So there's plenty of sail area, as I pointed out, and plenty of crew. As they feel the waves and wind, the Pride crew move in and out as one, winning races for their skippers. You could call this the big man's ballet. Sloops with the most skillful Pride crew like to get into tacking duels because they win them. Here is some more Pride crew at work. There can be any limit of prize. Usually they have two, but it's not limited. And here's a tack. Here's what a tack looks like. So the Pride crew come in, they pull the pry boards out from under the deck staples, and they duck the boom, shove the pry boards out on the other side, and jump out. Timing is obviously critical. Imagine if there were more crew on the pry boards, like sometimes there's a dozen, and they all have to get off, get the pry in, shove it across, and jump out. More pry crew doing their jobs. Crews are almost entirely male. This is changing somewhat, but as you can see, weight is important, especially on the pry. There are no winches. And these sloops have serious weather helm. So let's talk about sailing around the markers. Safety is important. So the race committee tries to set the course up so there won't be any jives. Why? Because boats may sink on the jives. I've had on the race committee boat as many as 6 boats all sunk around us when the wind came up. They don't sink forever. They sink for a while until the sandbags and lead ingots and crew are taken out of them. Then they're refloated, but it's not a quick operation. If the sloop sinks during racing caused by, for example, the huge boom slamming across the deck and heeling the boat over during windy jibe, the divers must go down inside the hull to refloat it. You have to get the lead out, and that's a lot of work. Starboat Olympic medalists hoping to buy a Bahamian sloop of their own found this all out the hard way. Practicing on a borrowed sloop, the helmsman asked the crew, "Can we jibe?" "Sure," said his crew of star sailors. "No, man," said the one Bahamian crew. Guess who was right? And guess what star crew sunk a sloop that day? I've seen an overpowered sloop go so fast it sailed too close to the edge and sailed itself right under and sunk. They don't wear life jackets. Again, they can swim to any island. They've been swimming for a long time, so This is not considered a necessity for safety. Sails are loose-footed in strong winds. Sometimes smaller sails are used, and sometimes they reef. So here's some chaos for you. Confusion, chaos. Some more chaos. And you have to finish with the same crew that you started with, so they've got to get this guy back on the boat, or they'll be disqualified. So this is the incident that I've mentioned, where they sailed their boat under. They rounded the mark right in front of me and in heavy air and changed course to sail downwind to the finish. So they started easing the mainsail, and the overpowered sloop picked up speed and went faster and faster and faster. And it just simply sailed itself down under the water. I was amazed. So I took a photo, which I've never published because I thought this crew might be a bit embarrassed. The water is also warm. It's 80 degrees, maybe. So here's a jibe coming. You can see the mark on the right, and it doesn't look like it's going to be too easy, but it's coming. And here are small sails in heavy winds. Here's a squall. The rain was coming down on my lens, the raindrops. And this is the sloop. Keep your eyes on him. A squall is no reason not to race. They just continued competing. Here's some disappointment. So, finishing our race, let's do some bedding, the downwind leg, sailing away from the wind. This is when you have a chance to get some beautiful photographs as opposed to chaotic photographs. After the race or during the race, if you protest another boat, you don't have to notify either the race committee or the other boat on the water. You have up to an hour after the finish to let the race committee know that you are protesting. Why? The hope is that the parties will have a chat and no protests will be needed. Regattas are all about fun. Why would you want to spend your evening in a protest meeting when you could be dancing? So work it out. Don't bring a protest in. So these are Class A sloops sailing to the finish, and the downwind legs show the classic beauty of these boats, sailing under blue skies with turquoise, warm, clear waters, and they've inspired much art. So I wanted to show you just quickly what these boats look like when they're being sailed well, because there's a lot of variety in how these boats are sailed. Stefan Knowles is the national champion in all three classes, all four classes, actually, and he always sails boats built by his brother, Mark, who builds them under a tree near their house. So there's the A class, 28 feet, and Stefan sails running tide. The B class, 21 feet, C class, 17 feet, and the small youth boat. So here's Stefan sailing the big boat, the 28-foot boat. Here's the 21-foot boat. He's got it well balanced. Here it is, well balanced by the Pride crew, winning regattas. Here's a little boat. This is a 17-foot boat on a tack. You could see while Stefan ducks the boom, the crew, in addition to ducking the boom, is having to get in on the pry board, and you can see them shoving the pry boards out on the other side of the boat, getting ready to come off on the next tack. There's a little boat with the pry crew. And here's Stefan on the little boat. I call this Mothers Hate This, Dentists Love This. But he's showing us some of what makes him so good. So these boats are from the home island of Long Island, and it's 80 miles long, has only 3,000 inhabitants. And it's built by fifth generation boat builders from the tiny settlement of Mangrove Bush, again, under a tree near their house. So Stefan picked out these photos himself, which is why I wanted to show them to you. They show the differences between the sloop classes, and they show what it takes to each one to go fast. So these are little boats, the kids' boats, 12 feet long. So this about wraps it. For me, the best part of this experience has been the friendship of the Bahamian sloop sailing community. My photos have been reproduced in art, and my photos are all through the Bahamas. And they creep up in the most interesting places, like grocery stores and on inter-island ferries, on people's phones. They're in the 5 TV programs that the Bahamian government has produced. First time they've ever documented their own sloop sailing. And they're in a big coffee table book they're doing, again, first major collection of sloop sailing information. Then there are also like cabanas, marinas. They're all over the place. Ken and I are again trying to get Slowpoke back to the Bahamas so this journey can continue. So right now Slowpoke is being refitted in Florida, and wish him good luck so we can have more adventures. So here's some of the derivative art from my photos. Artist imagination here of the pry board that you've all had the experience of riding on. Here's what it feels like again. More pry board. More derivative art. This is a regatta program. And here's the cabana of Margaret Woodside. And in her settlement, all the sloop sailors like to come and hang out here and have a beer, because my photos of all their sloops with them racing them are all over the walls. So it's a popular spot. And with cruise ships starting to come to the Bahamas, they're getting some cruise visitors as well in their cabana. And this is Dino in his restaurant in Nassau. Again, my photos of the sloops are all over the walls. So the sloop sailors use this as an informal yacht club, and they like to come over and hang out here and look at themselves on the walls like we all do. And I had the opportunity to photograph a wedding. And this is the wedding of one of the very few female sloop sailors in the Bahamas, and she's a former national champion. And by the way, she gave birth this week to twin boys. When Naoshi asked me to be her wedding photographer, she said, "I know you take good pictures of sailboats. Do you photograph weddings?" I said, "I never have, but if it's the wedding of the most gorgeous, talented sloop sailor in all the Bahamas, I'd be honored." So I had the very fun experience of being her wedding photographer. And my photo has even been used at a funeral where the graphic artist took my photo and made this memorial button for the bowman, Pluck. So he will always be remembered doing what he really, really likes doing the most, which is racing sloops. So come to the Bahamas and see it for yourselves. In the meantime, if you want to see more, you can go to my website. And if you can't remember www.janpehrson.com, just Google my name, Jan Pehrson, and you'll hit it that way. All my photos and all my published articles are up on the website, as well as links to the 5-part Bahamian TV series called The Story of Sailing. And I love this series because it includes 150 or so of my still photos, but the images are jumping and dancing around to Bahamian Racing's great music. So here in one of their TV shows, On the Water, you can see some photos jumping, and you can hear some rake and scrape, and you can get a feeling for what this is like. So come on to the Bahamas. It's fun. That's rake and scrape. Thanks for coming.
Anyone have any questions in the room?
And you know what you're talking about because he's been there in 1954.
So,
I didn't call on you, sorry.
so the I saw that you said that they usually I mean they don't wear life jackets, and they're also the audience is really important, and they're on land. So
No, they're on the water too.
oh, they're usually on the water. So I'm curious if the courses are usually set up to stay close to land for both those reasons.
They set the starts and the finishes near the land
Okay,
because they want everybody to see them.
but they can go out pretty far.
They do.
Okay.
They do. Mhm. Yep.
You said they swim between islands, right?
They do. I mean, I'm not saying it's a great idea not to wear a life jacket on the water, but they don't. And gee, they're good swimmers. So
Yes, in 1996, we were cruising from BVI's to Texas, and we stopped in Georgetown, Houston Tire during the Family Regatta. And in those days, they allowed the dinks on the cruising boats to follow along the racing boats. And we were following along one boat, and they had about 8 out on the dagger board, and it broke.
oh, wow. So everybody went in the water, right?
Right, so we sent around there and ended up our little 10-foot dink. We had 7 sailors hanging on the sides
Wow.
as we took to shore, and they were a happy bunch. And at the ninth of the race, we couldn't buy a drink. Those guys, they were so happy to drink. And I noticed in my notes that in 1996, the winning boat for the Class A was running tide.
Yeah.
So so it's kind of interesting. We really enjoyed it. It was a great time. Georgetown is a great cruiser-friendly harbor.
Yeah.
It really is.
And it's still true, you know, that like you notice some of the photographs were taken from right in front of the starting line. So they know me and they don't really mind me being out there on a powerboat right in front of the start. But I mean, that wouldn't happen at the America's Cup, you know. So cruisers are all out in their dinghies all over the water following the sloops around. The sloops are sailing in and out between the anchored cruisers, and it's a real friendly situation.
Any other questions in the room? We did have a question online. Bart wanted to know the residency rules so that we can get down there and start delving bills and support, and we can launch an RYC team.
It's easy to get a visa as a tourist. So, and you can get one for 6 months. So don't worry about that until you're
Long enough to build a boat.
Yeah. But it was great that Ken was able to get his residency, because that's not an easy thing. And he did. And it was because of the sloop sailing community who all went to bat for him that he got it.
You have a question on the anchored start. How do they determine the position? Is there a pole position, or who gets to weather?
They draw.
Great,
They draw numbers.
thanks.
I've been dreaming of going to the Bahamas since I was a little child. There was a yachting magazine in the late 1950s that had the first Americans that had gone to the SORC decided they'd take a flyer on the weekend and went over there and got on a few of these boats. And the yachting guy went along and took some beautiful pictures. And if anybody in their stash of old yachting magazines can find that, I would love to see it again. There are some really beautiful pictures in there.
This is,
And
of
now-
course,
and
this is, of course, Steve Jones, and he and June Jones are who I visited in 2014 when I started doing this. I was there on their boat
And I
windmills.
could never get on a boat when we were there. I tried, but it was fun to watch. And we went around and sort of mirrored the photography boat that Jan was in with Art Payne, who's a great guy. He's been going down for quite a long time, being the sort of fly in from out of town committee chair down there, so that he kind of can separate the arguments and stuff a little as an outsider. And he's his older brother, Chuck Payne, has designed some gorgeous boats, and they're quite a couple because he's about this tall and Chuck's about 6'4" or something. And so when they are together around boats, it's really kind of lots of fun. And they came to Art's launching of his IC that he had rebuilt over 3 or 4 years in clown suits. That's, maybe I'll try and find those photographs because they're pretty funny. Anyway, a great bunch of people, and I've never had more fun sailing in my whole life as the Bahamas. The junior program down there is quite a lot of fun on its own. So the year we were there was the first year that they did junior program with the 12 boats, the 12-foot boats, and they were a little bit not quite ready. And so we fiddled around and put some mast steps in and, you know, things like that. So, and the kids had a great lot of time. There weren't very many kids there that who knew how to sail very well, but they went out and gave it a try. And one of the girls won that year because her dad was one of the skippers of the A boats. So she had a little leg up on everybody, but they do have their own junior program down there, which is really great.
And they've been doing more and more what they call international sailing, the juniors. So in other words, they're in opties. So kids have a choice. Do they want to sail the sloops, or do they want to sail the opties, or both? And the Bahamas have been sending people, Bahamians, to the opti worlds lately also.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say that there's a big sailing community at Georgetown. There's 200 or 300 cruising boats there every year. Not everyone stays until the Family Island Regatta because it's in April, which is a lot of boats have already left for the Caribbean by that time. But they do make donations to the junior program, and they do give gear, excess gear that they have available to boats that need it. However, there's no one that I know of who has invested the amount of time and love into Bahamian sailing as Jan has. And she's really unique, and they're so lucky to have her.
So does anyone on the Zoom have any questions? Raise your hand, unmute you. Don't see anything. Well, this is our first speaker night with in-person and Zoom, and first in person in probably 2 years. Really pleased to see 25, 30 of us in the room, another 20 online. So really great to have everybody in the club. Jan, thank you so much. Really wonderful presentation, amazing photos. That's what most of the comments were about. It's just everybody was so pleased.
It's been big fun. Thank you, Randall. This was actually Randall's idea. I showed him a few of the photos and he goes, "That's hilarious." He says, "I think you should present that." So it's been fun.
To the far north of that. Take this thing off. To the far north of that, and something that Ornith is very familiar with and personally passionate about. You have racing of the Bodmore, the big boat, which is the big Galway hooker. And they're ballasted by stones. They have no keel, only a keelson. They are still traditionally built out of wood. And there are families now that have been racing them for many, many years. But if you want to, you can go and spend 5 days, and they will teach you, if you already know how to sail and race, how to race one of those boats, and you'll have an opportunity to race in one of their summer regattas.
Cool.
It is an incredible experience. I did it once, and I hope my body will let me do it one more time when COVID is over.
All right, well, thank you everyone online. I'm going to shut down the Zoom. The bar is still open for those of you who are here.